So good morning. Thank you so much for joining us at the Class Council's panel this morning. So we really want to make this a discussion of, what's worked if you're involved in your class councils, kind of what the councils is, and what's our motivations for joining. So my name is Jenna Balatic. I'm from the class of 07, so I'm on the class of 2007 council. In addition, I've served the career chair role for the last year. And originally I joined the council because I was really interested in promoting opportunities for undergraduates for externships and Metcalf fellowships, since I did both as an undergrad. And I found personally that the class council was a really great way to initially get involved in university initiatives. There are so many people who have so many different interests on the council, and it's a great way to kind of come together as a group and find out what other people are working on and connect with your peers from the year, many of which I did not know when I was in the college. I've been surprised by how many other alums I've connected with that I had no idea existed.
I'm Trina Burek. I am class of 1987. I became interested in the class councils just as a way to give back to the university, first of all. I came to the volunteer caucus last year and found out about some of the opportunities. Obviously, we're all here because of that. I think the university is an amazing influence in my life, and I wanted to do something to give back. I thought the class council specifically were a good way to connect with the people. That's what makes the university what it is, and it was a good way to reach out and connect with some other alumni.
My name is Hugh, and I was class of 2008 and also class of 2017 now that I'm back as a graduate student.
Didn't take that long?
Well, that's what they're funding me for that long, so I guess I'll stay there for the long. Yeah. History of religions. Yeah. Yeah, it's a long time.
You've gotten approval.
Yeah. And I was actually in Boston between graduation and now, and I joined class council for, I guess, two reasons, one of which was the fact that I felt like after graduation, it sort of abruptly ended, in a way, my 4 years here and my new life out there, and so it was a good way for me to stay connected to the university. And also, I was doing alumni interviews and Metcalf readings, like the application readings, before I joined class council, and I felt like it was just, those events are very sort of instantaneous and intense, but it ended after 2 or 3 weeks.
It hasn't been that great of a time commitment. I think as time goes on and those bonds between your classmates strengthen more and more, you'll see more results.
Just as far as keeping energy up, I think something that's really helped with our class council is breaking it down by, like Tracy and Jenna were saying, by breaking it down what people are interested in, what their area of expertise is, because then, so like with Jenna and I, with our jobs, we had connections that helped us promote getting externships and getting internships, and then promote that within the council. So if you have two people that are dedicated to a smaller cause, you have two really involved people for one thing, and then you just break it down by other smaller tasks, and then you have ownership, and people are really interested in doing it. So having sub-chairs is really important, I think.
Yeah, and I think we found it to be really successful and enjoyable in that way. Mm-hmm. Did you organize, was your class council similar? Ken?
Yeah, and I think there was no sense of burden at all, because the way you divvy up your class is you choose 20 to 30 classmates to be in charge of keeping in touch with, and naturally you choose people you know, and so it's not that you're going out there and
you should be required to choose 20 that you don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think we are implementing that too. Yeah, on top of the 20 or 30, there's additional 8 or 12 people, whom nobody has claimed yet. So it's yeah, kind of sad. Yeah, but so it's almost like keeping in touch with friends, and knowing that letting them know what's going on in the university.
Is everybody's class council the same size? Because you see like subcommittees and
I don't think so. I mean, ours.
They have much bigger ones, I think.
Yeah, it sounds
yeah, we're still growing. But that just recently I was able to reconnect with a friend who was just in town for the weekend, and we got together and had lunch, and I hadn't done that in years. And by the end of the conversation, I was telling her about the class council, and lo and behold, we have another member. So, and that's how it grows. I think it grows pretty organically.
Joe, did you have a
well, going off of your earlier comments on starting up, from my experience being on the 2007 council, we also have UChicago staff that kind of sit in a way to be a guide to the council. So I think that allows opportunities to coordinate events with other councils that aren't your class. And I think a specific example of that is for our Alumni Weekend. Usually we had a class of 2007 party, but as we became more senior, it became more of a young alumni party that weekend, and that was coordinated with, I think, class of 06 and 08. Yeah. So there's those opportunities there, but I think the best resource then would be going through the Alumni Relations Office to kind of get that link to those other councils. Here's a question, and because of that, if we want to have a discussion, from what I've heard from doing, we kind of had the benefit of being on not only class councils but other councils, and what we tend to hear from the more senior classes that haven't organized is we don't really understand the purpose of a class council, and we can maybe delegate this question to the panel or talk about it as a group.
One purpose is to keep you together between those 5 years of the reunion. That's I think a key point.
Right. But would you say how much? Would you say that it's strictly fundraising, finding lost contacts, or is it really? There's a lot of flexibility.
Well, I'll tell you another purpose that our class 78. Well, we've had a class council for about 2 or 3 years, and this year and last year we've sponsored at Alumni Weekend with other classes panel discussions on last year. I don't know what last year was on career change in the middle of your career, and that was something that was affecting a lot of our classmates, I think. But it also resonated with other classes, and so we had 3 or 4 people this year and last year talking about where they had changed their careers and crises and people who have gone to law school or hit people that are in business, other professions, people changing professions. And I think that's very timely for our class of 78. So that's just one example.
Yeah, we tried to do a social event too, like basketball. I think it's what somebody moved their legs, so we wouldn't have the basketball game. That was in February.
Well, and for the panel, do you guys want to address maybe the difference between looking at reunion fundraising goals versus class council, whether you look at participation numbers versus dollar numbers, just to distinguish how class councils kind of measure their goals?
Yeah. And so we look at it as participation numbers. So we had set a goal of, a certain percentage of our class to give, regardless of if that's $1 or $100.
You're not setting the high mark high enough. $100 to $1,000.
Exactly. Maybe a couple more years out.
How much did Ms. Slater give at our reunion?
Yeah,
20 million or something?
No, he gave $25 million. So we got.
We got something to break next time.
We had $1.7 million without that, and that was pretty good. That was
That's
a 30th
amazing.
reunion, and then 25 came in, so we beat the record.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Very impressive.
Very
Well, and
impressive.
I think both of your points and even the conversation about goals cuts back to the unique position that as class council members we have to shape the message to our class, and we know what's timely for our class, we know what's appropriate goal-wise, and yet we can still sort of set the goals a little higher and, like you were talking about with externships, and exceed your own expectations. But to know a little bit better, your group, because it is your class.
Yeah. And I think, there's at different points, while we may not be able to give back as much financially, we do then hope to create other opportunities that young alumni can give back to. Although maybe, Michelle's ready to make that gift.
Oh, yeah.
I knew it.
Just get her to give $100 a year for 10 years, and then she'll really take off.
Well, okay, here's a
Yeah.
question, just on like things that this council could do. For your council, do you have members that kind of, are those same members, the same people that maybe follow up with the Chicago magazine on where your class members are?
That's like
today?
that's what my role is on the council.
Okay.
I'm like the correspondent.
I just gave him a class note.
So yeah, he give me material here, so I get to edit everything. I'm like the truth that, you know.
Because that's the one thing I would think about.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
maybe the downside of a class council is it still seems decentralized. It's not like we issue like a 2007 class bulletin like quarterly or something.
Newsletter.
It seems like
Yeah.
we still have like updates in the Chicago magazine. We have other organizations.
But that's
doing
good, because
that.
there's some classes, even our class,
Right.
sometimes doesn't have anything in there. It should have
Sure.
something, and so that would be a positive thing. Like the class of '79, a lot of times doesn't have anything. I noticed that, and so if they had a class council, maybe they would come up with a couple of things, and people would reconnect.
Right.
Mary Ruth, are the class correspondents integrated into the class councils? Are they considered part of that council? Because I know for the class of '99, you know, we have co-chairs, and then we have, you know, a class correspondent and a career chair. Those are really the defined leadership roles. They're people, you know, different initiatives have different people heading them. But are other councils structured that way, where the correspondent is kind of a key part of what the council is doing?
We do in the class of '78.
And I came to this meeting today because I've been reading about the class councils in the class notes, which I'm editing right here, and I didn't know enough about them, so I wanted to come and hear you all. But as you were talking about collecting news, there are some classes where it would be a great help if the, say, 20 people that you're keeping track of, that you would feed news about a different set of those people every now and again, because some correspondents, you know, spend a large part of their class column saying, you all haven't sent me news. So, you know, if you send and say, here's news from 2 of my people on my list, and the next, maybe twice a year do that, and there'd be 4 names in it each year that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So I think it'd be a great thing.
Is there anything like on that? Can you put anything that anybody wants to say, or is there any sort of judgment that has to be issued in terms of what actually gets in the magazine?
We don't. The only thing I would take out would be. No, actually, I mean, in terms of if you read all of the class notes, you'll find that in every issue there is always someone who is taking issue with some university policy. So that stays in. I mean, if somebody said something offensive, politically you can say I'm voting for so-and-so, but if you make an offensive comment about some group or something like that, then we will go back through your class correspondent to say, are you sure you want to say that? Because we're not going to let you.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, but that's so,
rare.
That takes out half of my class notes.
There we go. I was thinking, like, if 2 people got married and then it went like that, then they could have an interesting counterpoint sort of a contribution.
Actually, we have had things like that.
Okay.
We've turned that down a little bit, thinking the kids might be reading it someday.
Okay.
One thing that seems to me that I know our council's doing, and I know the younger councils are, is that they have they have somebody, or one of their initiatives is focused on social networking and keeping people in touch with Facebook and LinkedIn and other things like that. And it seems to me that having a class correspondent who's integrated with that makes a lot of sense, because even in the world with social media, I think the class notes are important, because some people aren't a part of Facebook, or I mean, when I get the magazine, I read the notes for my class, I read the notes for the class ahead of me and the class behind me, and the people in the classes ahead of me and behind me probably wouldn't be in the class of '99 Facebook group. So in some ways it makes the job of the class correspondent easier, because if they don't have to go shake the trees to find news for people. But it's almost valuable if they can synthesize what they're seeing in the social networking groups and the online communities, and distill it into class notes. and I think there's benefit for having that more broadly. So I mean, for the, I don't know how. I mean, I know the university wants each class to have the class council be what the members think it should be, want it to be. But it almost seems to me like it makes sense to sort of have a guideline that says class count, like part of the leadership of the class council should be the correspondent, and when and if there isn't a correspondent, or if the correspondent is changing, part of what the responsibility of the leadership of the class council is to recruit a new correspondent.
Well, I think that we're doing that now when correspondents decide to leave because of their commitments and so, that now we go to the class council if there is one for that class, and said you have somebody who's willing to take that on, because obviously you know your volunteers, and it's something that probably does matter to you in keeping your class together. So I think as time goes on, and I can't imagine if you were to say to an existing correspondent, would you want to be a member of the class council or stay in touch, that they would say no, or vice versa, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the aims are the same.
Is that a legitimate function too for a correspondent? If somebody doesn't contribute something, but you have news or knowledge of something that happened to them, is it actually a matter of doing reporting and saying something without necessarily their approval, or should you always try to get back to an alum first before anything about them comes in the class notes, that they at least have a heads up in terms of something that might be related to them? Because like you say, you could go on a social networking site. I guess if it's posted publicly, anybody can read it. But would they necessarily want that exported in the university magazine? So is there a protocol that you should check with the people first, or just out of courtesy or anything else? Can I
say so. Yeah, I would say so.
New York Times or something.
There are different approaches. So for the
For me, yes.
the college class notes are different than some of the others. Like I got my Booth Alumni magazine, and if they see somebody gets promoted, and has been named vice president or chief something officer, they include a one-line sentence that says this person was promoted to, was named president or this, or this person's gone to start their own business, and there's no color around it. I don't think that would be bad, but I think you almost, if you see a classmate, we had a classmate who was quoted in a Wall Street Journal article because she's head of global sourcing at Anheuser-Busch InBev or something, and we reached out to her and said, we saw you were quoted in the Wall Street Journal, can we include that in the class notes? And the hope is that she can say, yeah, sure, feel free, and you can also
give you some
you can also say I got married, or I was at a wedding of a classmate and saw 4 other people.
Right.
So you have an opportunity to. I feel like you have an opportunity if you reach out to them and are able to find out what else is going on. But
We have guidelines for the class correspondence, not all of which they follow, but one of them is kind of a paragraph or so about the nuances of checking to make sure, things you should check, the things that you might be allowed to not mention, because, you can use judgment on it. And if there's something that seems a bit iffy, again, we will say, did you make sure that was all right?
Going back quickly to the social networking, for the class council purpose of Facebook, do you guys see people sharing personal accomplishments and things like that on the Facebook page, or how is it utilized for your classes individually?
I've seen it utilized mostly as kind of a communication tool, like these are different events that are happening. So, for example, we could post Phoenix South Chicago, what's going on, and we could use it to promote that. I haven't seen it as a place where people are sharing personal news, but I don't know if you guys have observed that.
In general, I never go on my Facebook clubs
Yeah.
or groups or whatnot, so I wouldn't look there on a daily basis. But for other groups, like when we do Phoenix Fest and Young Chicago parties and whatnot, those usually get sent out as separate invites and not through class council, so there's that opportunity to see it. But I guess if you were on it, you would get email notifications if it was updated.
We're having a cocktail reception next week, and that's one of the things that I did. It just, you can create a message on that Facebook page that then gets sent to everybody, and at least I know I received it through my email. So it was a quick link to that Facebook page where there was more information. some people started some conversations that were kind of reminiscent of our days at the university, and that was fun. But I'm the same way. I don't go to that specific page all the time. And then there too, there were some comments and questions that, let's not go there. It got a little too personal, I think. So we kind of stopped that thread. But it's just one more way, one more virtual meeting place,
What have you found, Ken?
Yeah, well, Facebook for 08 is still pretty new, and I think, as you were saying, it's mainly a way to communicate. I can't speak personally because I don't really use Facebook, but I know that we've just started with that, and Phoenix Fest, and right, usually things that are local Chicago-based events.
Is there an opportunity within the class notes to put in there, like, join, class of 2005 Facebook page and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for example, in this most
participation?
recent set, there's a class that says we now have a Facebook page, and the URL, all of the ugly URL that it is given for that. But on the online version, we'll have a direct link to it. I also saw in this current set kind of an advertisement for joining a class council. I can't remember which class it is, but yeah, people can say whatever they want, actually.
Because that would be a nice way if there was like collaboration between all of the external entities of the press that alum get and the class councils. It was all, and I think maybe like the Facebook pages are a way to centralize that. If we also had the link for the UChicago magazine on our Facebook pages, and that way there's that cross where you have the opportunity to advertise us, we have the opportunity to advertise the magazine, and I think that would also, because we don't really report out maybe what's going on at the UChicago, but if we're doing fundraising, I think that's crucial to know what's the latest on campus. It's almost valuable for councils to have that information too.
And even more, maybe along with the link to the magazine as a whole unit, better to link to where you update your information.
Right.
Because, you put your news in, but you'd be updating your information for the rest of us as well. I mean, I think they can find the magazine if they want it,
sure.
But I'd like to make it as easy in as many places as possible for people to let us know where they are and what they're doing.
And then have a link for the for giving gifts.
Yeah, for giving gifts, and even in terms of updating information to the Chicago Careers Network, different things like that. Yeah, I think that would be great to really bring it together and have, central communications. Because I know whenever we put on an event like the Young Alumni Celebration or Phoenix Fest, we have a completely kind of distinct communications for that. But I think centralizing it will be really important, and class councils are a great way to do that.
And then another thing too is. From my perception of our class council is, yes, the council sets those goals for participation rates and whatnot, and the only way we really communicate those rates is when we're doing the phone calls. Yeah. And that's the only way people know that we even have a goal. So if we post our goals then on those sites, and also if we're doing like class council bulletins, that information, that internal meeting minutes somehow gets distributed to the whole class as a way to see this is now the class goal, that we're shooting for this goal, and in that way you can incline them as they monitor our progress. If we're back close to meeting our goal, maybe we'll get that extra gift.
I'm not sure if I'd want it posted on the Facebook page.
Your participation goal?
Yeah.
Like we have a 90% participation goal and we're this far?
For giving or for...
Yeah.
That I can see too.
Or really any council goals. If there's some kind of goal where it requires the class to do something, I think it would only help you to say the council has this, a 90% fundraising participation rate. Currently we're at 50% and there's another month to go. If that was somehow communicated to the whole class, as opposed to how we currently do it, which is the only opportunity I have would be if I have you on the phone, you're trying to get a gift out of you.
Or is it legitimate for the class as a whole to try to set goals? See, I'm wondering, as the council, our role, are we seen as representative of the class, or are we seen as just more the entity that helps the university accomplish other things that it wants to do, or is it just that we're just willing to do it, and okay, do whatever you guys want to do, or that sort of a thing? You know, is it the transparency, the democracy, however, the wonderful things that you think University of Chicago alumni would be so concerned about? How that all ties in terms of this whole process, I don't know. Right now, it's just, you know, I'm happy to do whatever we want and that, but I don't know if there's any other system or something to this.
Yeah,
above and beyond that.
I found that at least in our class, my experience has been a little bit of meeting in the middle. That there are certain of us who are joined the council. I know I joined specifically for careers initially, and so I know. So then once I expressed that interest, then the university came back and said, okay, we would like externships in law, in government, and in finance. What can you do to help find those? So it was a little bit of a meeting in the middle, was my experience.
And I can concur with that in terms of the fundraising side. That alumni relations contact that sometimes sits in on our calls, they have the historical data of our past fundraising efforts. So they could say, last year you were able to get a 95% goal. This year, do you think it's reasonable to get a 98% goal? And then the council can say, well, to get 98%, that would be 200 more people. Let's go with 150. That seems more reasonable for our council. And then if there's someone outside of the council, I would think, that says, hey, I disagree with your goal, I would say, well, then get on the council. So.
I think one of the other values of the class council from a university perspective is it's kind of like a recruiting ground for other initiatives. So I was involved in the same networking event that Ed was involved with over last Alumni Weekend, and I think they just pulled people from the class councils because of our involvement, and so it was a neat way to network with other class councils to have kind of consistent approaches and share best practices. So I think from a university perspective, that's probably one of the other goals. Yes. Yeah.
And we don't turn anyone away from the councils. There's no elections or whatnot. If you want to be on, you're on.
Write a check and breathe.
Well, you don't even have to write a check. Well, and to add to that, when we do our fundraising goals, sometimes they drop a hint. And by the way, there's 17 individuals on the council that have not given.
Oh, really?
Then you got to recruit these members.
So our 2007 class council is probably 30 some individuals. So with all different levels of involvement. Some are on every week. Some people, like you were saying, do very particular aspects of what we overall try to accomplish.
Yeah.
I have a question actually. And I think it's a question for you, actually. When you were talking about advertising the goals and like how many more gifts we need until that goal is met, I remember receiving a lot of emails, actually. I don't know if it was from the university or from my class council, but I know at least for the class of 2008, we have our own website that advertises all that information, and there's even like a graph. It's pretty nifty.
I think part of, from a university perspective, and Mary, you might be able to back me up on this, but the way that the communication works is that generally a letter will go out at some point during the year to your classmates explaining a goal that you've set X percentage of participants, but if you've given early, then you stop receiving those communications until the end of the year. So depending on when you make your gift throughout the year, you will be receiving communications, whether in the form of a letter or an email from the university. So, go ahead.
And there's two, especially for young alumni, it might get a little confusing because there's two goals. There's a class-by-class goal, and then last year, all of you had the Tim George Challenge, which was an overall young alumni goal. So the whole young alumni community was getting email about the Tim George Challenge, and then depending on what year you are in your class council, you would be getting 1 to 2 letters and 2 to 4 emails with that goal in it for your class. And the idea being that each of those individual class goals adds up to the total number for the young alumni goal.
I guess my point is I was kept very much in the loop.
Good, you felt communicated.
I have question I'd like to pose to the room. So all of us that are here from our volunteer caucus and that are involved in our class counselors are like the easy people. You know they're going to give a gift, you know they're going to volunteer, you know they're going to plan events. But what about folks that want to stay lost or don't want to give? What's the best practices in reaching out to them or getting new people involved with the alumni community?
Take them out to dinner. That's what we're doing tonight.
we in the spring had a young alumni party at the LaSalle Power
Company.
Yeah. So, but what was interesting about that is it was a free event for alum in the past 10 years. So, and then we were able to advertise that. And so I did, and people that purposely wanted to stay lost and in looking at their historical data haven't been giving because they haven't been able to reach, they actually showed up because it was this free event. and then what we did was we had all these like advertisements that were placed throughout the room showing like the UChicago experience. So we were kind of doing an advertising on behalf of the university where we're showing reasons why you should give and percentages of study abroad, new construction on campus. So just kind of to show what the end result of the contribution is. But I thought that the free events that we were able to do for the young alumni really was able to increase that contact information because a lot of new faces came out for that event. And not only that, I think like we were talking about earlier, the benefit of crossing over into multiple years to do it within that 10-year period. We had groups of friends going and things like that. So,
I mean, I think I think that there are, having gone through 2 reunions, there are in at least 1 year of class council fundraising, there are clearly some people who want to stay lost because they don't feel inclined to give money, and that they're a challenge. But I mean, I think that it's helpful for the councils, to think about what their fundraising goal might be in terms of participation or dollars, if there's a dollars goal, but to also think about the university's definition, the Alumni Association's definition of engagement, which is go, give, help. So if you think about your class, there may be a number of people who aren't inclined to give, and I think over the long term it would be good to try and get as many people inclined to give as they can. But if you think about it in terms of people who might not want to give but would go to an event, whether it's a Harper lecture or something else, or help on as a volunteer for Alumni Schools Committee or CAPS, how many people in your class are not inclined to engage on any of those 3 levels? Because I would guess, or any of those 3 areas, because I would guess that number is probably pretty small. And I mean, I think the university has goals. They want the alumni contributions are really important to making the budget work at the school and providing opportunities for students and retaining faculty. But there is this broader goal of 50% plus 1 alumni engagement, and the councils can really be powerful vehicles to mobilize the college, which is one of the largest alumni segments and driving towards that 50% plus 1 goal. So so if you find somebody who wants to stay lost for the purpose of giving, maybe it's important for the councils to talk about the goal of getting the whole class engaged in if not giving and going to events or helping as a volunteer.
I think
go ahead.
I think it helps to understand where their hesitation is coming from. I don't have this experience personally, but it's something we talked about on our council, that there were some people who didn't have the best experience at the University of Chicago. And this climate might be going through some difficult times. And one way you can respond to that, I think, is to realize that there are great resources here at the university for everyone at every point in their career, whether they're fresh out of college or they're thinking of a career change and things like that. So,
go ahead.
I actually have a question for the university staff folks. So given that there's 3 categories, there's the go, there's the give, and then there's finally the help, which I guess is kind of the goal for everybody if we want to consider that. Is there data that we can have on whether, if people haven't gone to anything, then they get targeted emails where it's just about attendance, not about giving, and then targeted emails if they've gone to something but haven't given, then you concentrate on the giving and then move kind of up through those 3 steps so that it's an incremental involvement, so you don't ask too much of someone who's not willing. I don't know if there's that data, but I think a targeted campaign could be really helpful for any of the class councils to get people involved, get fresh blood into the alumni community.
That data definitely exists, and it's not a problem to get it. It's just if you work with employees from alumni relations, they can get it for you. They might need a little time to cut it up for you.
Absolutely.
But absolutely we have it.
But I think that's a good point, because it goes to your point of understanding, if they're not willing to give, what the hesitancy is, and if they didn't have a good student experience, and they're able to see how the student experience is different, or if they felt like they didn't get support from CAPS or something else, and they're able to see now both, what CAPS is doing for current students and what it's doing for alums, and how how the alumni network can matter, then maybe that helps reverse change the opinions.
And I think, the other hesitation I heard was that, well, why should we, help out those kids? I mean, that sounds horrible, but I guess some people feel that way. But for me, at least, the value of our education is an ongoing and ever-evolving type of thing. The better the University of Chicago is seen in the world, the more valuable my education is to me as I go to apply for jobs and things like that. And so, it's not just giving so that current students can benefit, but so that the university maintains its image and its standing.
Well, I don't know, maybe it's heretical too, saying a little bit, but giving is important, careers are important, but there's still the whole affiliative reason, like we came to university, and particularly if you stayed here long enough to get a degree, that it meant something. I mean, I've been in a book club. I mean, we started it's almost 20 years we've been doing it with the alumni group. I was one of there's several people that are around still in the group, maybe longer than some marriages last, for 20 years, as far as it goes. But I mean, like the funny thing, when I had to have knee surgery, I didn't have anybody else in my household that could help me even just go back and forth to the doctor's office. I was taking care of my dad. He was sick himself. He just passed away this past June. But I'm saying the person that helped me to go to the outpatient surgical center was someone that I knew through my alumni book club that helped me co-found the place, 18 years ago. And so to that extent, that even if it's not, ultimately you think it all comes back. In some sense, people understand where that goes in terms of the connection to the university. But what you can do that way, just as on a human dimension with other of your fellow alums, that's something that really has value, and that makes you feel good just about having maybe a more like a family sort of sense in terms of what your experience was here. And that's something I think you can do, just I say, on that human dimension with other people, and that the university can offer.
I mean, just to build on that, as an alum and as staff, the most effective contacts are peer-to-peer. It's because, I've met with, I work with people who are maybe 30 years out of college. And they'll come out of a meeting and they'll say, this is really good, I'm really glad the university's doing this. I was reluctant to take this meeting because I thought, it was the university equivalent of selling timeshares. Because people want to feel engaged, and they are concerned that if they take a visit, they're simply going to be asked for money. And that's the extent of the engagement. So if you reach out to a peer and say, this is what we have, and this is the flexibility that we have with it, I think that's very powerful. And the other point about people who are lost, I think one of the things that I've seen in my experience with the class years I work with is that it's never static. And it's good and bad in that it's never static, that people who are very engaged will stay engaged. People, can be volunteers for 25 years out of college and then fall off the radar. And it's not static the other way. So people may have never opened a mailing, never answered the phone, and said, hey, you know, my kids are applying to college now, or just applied, and it made me think about my college time. So there's different life events that open the door to getting back together with your class. So there's tremendous opportunity, I think, especially if it's classmates saying, you know, this is what we do, and you know, I'd like you to join.
Yeah. Oh.
I'm sorry. One thing I will say, just because I do interview Metcalfs and current students, and I try to like get to meet current students, and I'm like a total like groupie for current students. And I met last night. Like, it's really exciting. It's exciting to hear what they're doing, whether you want to live vicariously or you want to know what's going on. I mean, things that, you know, maybe I did, like I was in one of the first years of the Metcalf program, and I think it was 20, you know, or 40 opportunities, and now that it's 300, like, I think that's outstanding. And I interview students, and I can't believe some of the things they tell me about what they're doing on campus, and I'm so impressed. And when I hear those things, and I hear about the opportunities for scholarships or art center or whatever it is, and that these students I've met can benefit from that, or they're committed to it and they're passionate about it, it makes me excited about it. That's what it's about. So I think part of it is, it's like a chicken and the egg. You know, if you can get then current students involved with alumni, so that alumni are involved and invested in the current students. I mean, it always comes back to, what does it do for me? So it makes me feel better about myself that people are more impressed with UChicago and the world because our students are more successful in whatever it is. But I think that if you can make that connection and you can bring to them even a story of a student that you've met who has benefited from a scholarship or from Metcalf or from you know, some other kind of opportunity, and you can bring that personally to them, that's the most impactful thing you can do. And I picked on that list last year of who to call. I must have picked like everybody I knew had never given before, and they were sticklers, and it was really tough, and I tried to get pretty creative. But I think bringing those stories to people and saying like, oh my God, you know, I interviewed some kid who managed to raise $10,000 for a literary magazine. Like, we didn't have anything like that, and I only graduated 5 years ago. You know, that's unbelievable. That is so impressive, and I think that's the thing that makes the difference to people. If you can tell them, you can find out what they were interested in, what they studied, what they're doing now, and make some connection with something that's going on campus, they're going to want to be a part of that.
Yeah, and I think that it's valuable for students too to have that connection to the alumni community. I remember taking the next step my third year of college, and I could not envision what would possibly happen after college, but being able to actually talk to someone who had been through that experience was really valuable. And then being able to go back next year and talk about it, you know, and say, it's okay, you will someday get a job, or not if you don't want one. Because those are the things that are tough to imagine, and I think that's one reason that I wanted to come back as an alum and, you know, work with students too, is to have that. Yeah, to have that connection.
So I think we're just about out of time. So I don't know if you want to sum up with final thoughts. I know that Molly and I have cards if you want to be in touch with us. And then you have an announcement of what's happening right after.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you so much, first of all, to, you know, Ken and Trina for being on this panel as well, and to all of you for coming. I mean, it's wonderful to see so much involvement in the class council, and I'm sure we'll all be working together. And if you have any specific questions or wanted to work on anything, you can always feel free to contact me, or I think anyone else on our council too.
Sure.
And so, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.